Okay, good morning everybody, my beautiful New Zealand friends. You are New Zealanders. You are not Aotearoa rights. In yesterday's video, I went through a very important chapter from Adam Plover's book called The Benefits of Colonization, and I recommend that you get this book. But we've been talking about Tikanga, which is Maori law, L-A-W, Maori beliefs, Maori philosophy. And in New Zealand right now, Maori radicals are trying to introduce Tikanga as law officially, so that cases of law in New Zealand will be judged by Tikanga and not the rule of law that we have existing in this country. Now this is completely wrong, and it's a trick. The reason it's a trick is that, first of all, New Zealand had no law. Maori had no law prior to 1840. It was only utu, revenge. And secondly, Tikanga can be, the nuances and the subtleties of it can be defined as you go along. In other words, what's going to happen is that if you bring Tikanga in, the only people who can interpret the law, Tikanga, are going to be Maori. And so that's going to open the door to massive corruption and fraud. And when this happens, anybody, litigants, claimants, can be easily shafted, because the final say on what Tikanga means is left to Maori. Do you get it? But the foundation on which they are bringing this in, they are saying that Maori Tikanga was the first law of New Zealand, and we want to reinstate it in this country. And I'm arguing here that there was, and Adam Plover is arguing as well, that there was no, Maori had no law. They had no written law in New Zealand. And so we should reject this utterly, because it's a trick, it's a ruse, R-U-S-E. We're being conned. So let's just continue with where we left off yesterday. The disunited tribes and their jealousy of each other render it impossible to enact laws, wrote Captain Hobson to Governor Burke of New South Wales after visiting New Zealand in 1837 on HMS Rattlesnake. So when Hobson came here, that's William Hobson, who was the governor who was setting things up for the British here in the Treaty of Waitangi. He, 37, when he came here on a reconnaissance trip, he described the tribes as disunited. And he said it was impossible to enact laws because they were out of control here. Andy Oakley, who's a New Zealand author and respected author, he wrote this: pre-1840, with no law and order, New Zealand was literally in a state of anarchy. So just hold fire right there. They are wanting to bring in Tikanga, and the result of Tikanga back in prior to 1840 was anarchy. So if you want to bring a law in that's going to create anarchy, then bring in Tikanga, because that was the result, or the fruit, if you like, of Tikanga was anarchy. Andy Oakley goes on, without law there could not be property rights. Property could be taken and you could be killed without consequence, wrote Andy Oakley in his book, Once We Were One. John Robinson goes on and he says this: And John Robinson, and when the two cultures meet the New Zealand experience, in the absence of any codified law or higher authority, there was no rule of law, no guarantee of safety. The response to a perceived wrong would be either to attack and thus revenge the wrong, or to face another, starting with warlike challenges or following with argumentative dispute. So that's how you sort out issues with tikanga. You do it with revenge, or you do it with warlike challenges like hakas, or you do it with argumentative dispute. Now, do you really want this in New Zealand? In 1842, Te Whero, who later became the first Maori king, speaking of the changes brought about by the Treaty of Waitangi, said to his people in Kaitohi, quote, "And now I bring you this new treasure. We have brought law, a new law, to save us from killing and robbing each other. I will take this, my treasure, up Waipa, through every bend in the river. Friends, do not think little of what I say." So here is a chief pushing the adoption of British law because Maori law hadn't worked. Because all Maori law, this chief is saying from his own mouth, all Maori law brought us was killing and robbing. And yet we want to bring this back into New Zealand right now. Can you believe this? It was the law of Christianity that put an end to our cannibal practices, Tamihana Te Rapraha told the Kohimarama Conference of Chiefs in 1860. So what that tells you is that tikanga didn't put an end to cannibal practices, but actually was the cause of cannibal practices. Another chief, long Maori word, told the same conference, "My heart embraced the laws of the Pākehā. The law put an end to our evils." So here again, tikanga resulted in evils being able to be flourishing in Maori society, and yet we want to bring tikanga back. So do you want evil in our society to flourish? Well, then bring tikanga back. And Wiremu Te Whero of the Ngāti Henio, he said the governor came bringing with him laws. Hemiona, long Maori word again, told the same conference, "After this came the law. I saw its benefit and adopted it forthwith." Why did he adopt it forthwith? That's the law of the Europeans, Hobson's law, British law. Why did he adopt it? Because tikanga wasn't working. It was leading to evils, robbing, murder, plunder. The reason, he says, why I approved of it was it was a means of correcting all that went wrong. So with tikanga, there's nothing to correct wrong. The people who get to interpret what right and wrong is are Maori. And anybody who accepts that is a fool, a complete fool. Peririka said, missionaries were sent to us and then the law appeared. I'll finish with this. This is the words of Saraparananata, probably the greatest mind, and married him. He said this, in the words of Siraparananata, probably the greatest mind that marriedom has produced, and whose face adorns our current $50 note. He said this, many claims were made pre-1840 by various Europeans for the one piece of land sold to each of them by various Maori chiefs. So what he's saying was, he's acknowledging that chiefs were ripping off people, European settlers, by selling the same piece of land to multiple people. And according to Tikanga, that was okay. It was all right to do that. In other words, chiefs were shafting the settlers. And Siraparananata says, where was the law in those times to decide what was right? He's really saying, where was the law to stop Maori chiefs ripping off the settlers? The answer is there wasn't one. Siraparananata says the Maori did not have any government when the European first came to these islands. There was no unified chiefly authority over man or land. So even Siraparananata says there was no government, there was no set of laws, it was only tikanga. How could such an organisation as a government be established under Maori custom? The reason he says that is that Maori only had one law, which was revenge, or utu, or muru, plunder. Might was right. So we need to resist tikanga and stop it coming into New Zealand and being made law. Maori can do whatever they like in their confines of their maraes, in their homes, within their own people group. But it cannot be and must not be forced on all New Zealanders, because it's completely wrong, and they are trying to trick us. We're being tricked. It's a ruse. See you tomorrow.